What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Pit Limiter Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Buchanan. Joining me this week, we've got members 4 and 5 of the Pit Limiter Podcast family. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. John Poole III and Bobby Krug. What is going on, fellas?
Oh, not too much. As Zach said, I'm John Poole, recent college graduate, last May. Graduated with bachelor's in business administration, working currently on my master's degree in business analytics. I've been a long time NASCAR fan, at least the last 15 years, full season. Also, just in general, a big motorsports fan. Love the facts. Yeah, that's about basically it for me. What about you, Bobby?
Yeah, so my name's Bobby Krug. I'm 20 years old, currently going to college at SIUE for mass communications, video production background. Big fan of racing. I'm a kart racer myself. I've been in kart racing since 2016. Grew up as a NASCAR fan. Most recently became an IndyCar fan as well, and just love the motorsports and love connecting with guys like you that we all share that love. So
Awesome. That's what it's all about. We had a big weekend in motorsports, really big week if you look at it as a whole this past week. Daytona. Some loved it, some hate it. It's one of our favorite segments, Stop and Go. Bobby Krug, what do you got for us?
So yeah, obviously at the top of that, Denny Hamlin took home the victory in the Daytona 500. It was his second victory in the Daytona 500. And Joe Gibbs Racing actually finished 1, 2, 3, which was very emotional for the whole team, especially after the passing of J.D. Gibbs in the offseason. So yeah, Denny Hamlin picked up the win, Kyle Busch second, and Eric Jones an impressive run at the very last part of that race to get the third place. 14 cars were left on that lead lap with a couple red flags there towards the end, but most of the race was pretty green flag and pretty clean.
Colton Herta continues to impress people, man. Ran his first race last year at Sonoma. Topped the charts in spring training for the NTT IndyCar Series at Circuit of the Americas with a time of 1:15.132. He topped the likes of Alexander Rossi, Will Power, Ryan Hunter-Reay, Simon Pagenaud. This guy, I think, is the real deal.
There's some sad news today out of the F1 scene. Fan favorite track Interlagos, which has hosted the Brazilian Grand Prix for many years, is set to fall off the F1 schedule. There's been talks about this for at least the last 10 years. It looks like the Brazilian government is moving forward with a new venue. Looks to be a street circuit in Rio de Janeiro.
Bringing it back to NASCAR, we are looking at a potential shortening of the schedule for the NASCAR Cup Series, anywhere down to 32 to 28 races. Majority of that has to do with keeping the viewership interested, and also the avoidance of competing with NFL and college football. And you also might start seeing some midweek races, but all that's just kind of in talk right now between drivers and the NASCAR body.
There's some interesting news being reported by Adam Stern. According to an interview with Jim France, Jim France has made it well known that he's tried to actively recruit Rick Hendrick to join IMSA and the United Sports Car Series, but unfortunately Rick has not joined the series due to having his hands full with NASCAR and his dealerships.
Final topic on Stop and Go. The Face Car is back. I think was a fan favorite for Daytona. The Corey LaJoie Old Spice Go Fast Racing number 32 car that was ran in the Daytona 500, that was all over social media, makes a return for the Atlanta Motor Speedway. I think it's hard to miss, fellas. I think it's going to be a good car to look out for.
Oh, I'm pretty excited for it. That's going to be fun to see.
Oh yeah. So our first main topic, Formula E, the Mexico City race. It did not fail to impress. In case you missed it, last lap pass, Pascal Wehrlein was running out of energy. Lucas Degrassi stole the victory at the line. Just bare. I mean, and you got to remember, these cars are on low energy at the end of the race, anyways. They can't go over their specified amount of energy. Verline was at 1% going into the final corners. Degrassi, DaCosta, I mean, all these leaders are 2-3%, so everybody's very low on energy. And it's really cool to see a finish like this in Formula E, because really for the last couple years, people haven't really been paying attention to Formula E. Ever since it came on the scene, it wasn't really popular after its initial debut. It was just, at first it was just kind of, this is something new, something cool, and then it kind of lost its popularity, really, and I think this is a good step in the right direction for them.
Oh, I would definitely agree. I'll be honest with you, I didn't actually know they were doing a race until I saw the clip being retweeted throughout Twitter, and I was just amazed. Formula E has had this, though, during its entire existence, with excellent racing, excellent finishes, and such like that. And ever since its inception, that first race, you had Nick Heidfeld and I believe it was Prost's son, Nicholas Prost, I believe it was.
Yep.
They had that large crash, and
guess who ended up winning that race, by the way?
I cannot remember, actually.
Lucas Degrassi, ironically. It all comes full circle, man.
So yeah, Lucas Degrassi seems to be involved in a lot of great finishes with Formula E. I just think that they got some potential with this series. I think the main reason why it hasn't taken off, maybe because it's electric and everybody's kind of iffy with that, but maybe it's the sporting body not doing their part to promote it. There are rumors out there that it's just a test bed to see whenever F1 goes to fully electric power. So I don't know. I personally love the series, but I don't know when it's on. I'm kind of in the agreement with Parker Kligerman about how they handled things. It really wasn't a racer series. It was more of a, here's some Instagram influencers here to talk about the event and drum up some hype, but you're not really targeting that target demographic of racers.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, coming from like me as a primarily NASCAR fan, I mean, going back to what you said about the electric aspect, I think it's cool, especially looking at this clip. This is the first time I've actually seen a actual racing from Formula E. So when I go to a racetrack, it's about the sights and the smell and the sounds. And with electric, you kind of get shied away from that. But when I'm looking at this broadcast here of this exciting last lap, I mean, it's a motorsport. There's no denying it. It looks like something that I think a traditional motorsports fan could, totally get hooked on. And especially with a close finish like that. And you can see, obviously on the left side of the broadcast with all the energy percentages, I mean, it's just like a fuel mileage race. So, I mean, it's really cool to be able to look at that and see what this is and what it's got the potential to be. So,
and it's really evolved. I mean, the Gen 1 car, they couldn't even run a full race on it. They'd have to switch cars mid-race. And now they can actually make a full race, and actually you could even go over the specified amount of energy. You'd get disqualified, but you can well and beyond finish a full race, which is a big step for them. And I think really, if you think about this in the grand scheme of things, look at any form of technology that's been introduced to anybody ever. Initially, you're probably not going to have many takers on it. It's probably going to be, okay, it's different. But as time goes on, it becomes more and more popular. Look at the smartphone, for instance. I mean, the first iPhone was introduced, was it 07? 08?
07.
07, yeah. And it took a couple years, and then, became one of the biggest brands. Apple did. So I think, there's a lot of potential for them.
And also, there's other series that are associated with it, like the Jaguar Electric, I think it's vehicle series. I'm not really sure what it's called. I think it's the I-Pace series. Catherine Legg won for Bobby Rahaal's team. Bobby Rahal owns a team, and there's some big owners here. They have They have Andretti, that's in Formula E.
They have Dragon Racing too, I
They have
believe.
Dragon Racing with Jay. They have an Audi support team or factory team. They have a Porsche factory team. They have Venturi, which is part owned by Leonardo DiCaprio. So there's no shortage of star power there. It's just the way it's marketed is poor, very poor.
Well, and like you said, star power. They've had big drivers in it too. I mean, not necessarily like world champions, but they've had Nelson Piquet Jr. They've had Sebastian Buemi. Sebastian Buemi won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, I believe. So I mean, like, there's some solid drivers in this series.
And Nelson Piquet was their first champion.
Right.
So, yeah, they're just. I love what Formula E does, but they need to do more of it.
Right. Yeah. Not wrong. Speed weeks, and I think that's what everybody wants to talk about. I think that's what everybody came here to listen to us talk about. I'm not gonna lie. Before Sunday rolled around, I was like, man, I'm prepared to be disappointed because looking at the whole week leading up to the Daytona 500, it was less than exciting, I would say, if you're looking at speed weeks as a whole. And the 500 was pleasantly surprising. The duels, man, those are disappointing. I ran at night, and I think they need to get back to running those during the day. I know they moved them to the nighttime to try to lure in more viewers because that's when everybody's going to be more available in the evening. But I think it takes away from the racing. I don't think those cars race with that package as well in the nighttime. And it also doesn't make sense to race during the nighttime because for most of the 500, you're not going to be racing during the nighttime. I think the only reason we were finished under the lights is because we had so many red flags late in the 500.
I'll disagree with you on that. It's because they've been pushing the start time further and further back. This year's 500 didn't start till almost 3 p.m. In years past, it starts at 1. So it's part. Yeah, there were some pretty long there's 2 red flags there at the end. Definitely caused it, but no, it's more of NASCAR wanting to shift to a later audience. But
I will say though, I don't think the race would have necessarily been under the lights as long without those long red flags.
Oh no.
No.
So we went to the duels. We kind of started talking about the 500. Let's kind of bring back to Friday night's fun, spectacular race known as the NASCAR Gander Outdoor Truck Series race.
Oh man.
So, Bobby, I haven't heard from you. What was your thoughts of this race? It was really special, and one little particular segment that it now holds the record for least amount of trucks running at a finish of a single race with 9.
Well, I will say this, and this isn't really me picking the entire race apart. There's just only one thing that really stood out when I was watching it. Now, sure, the crashes were absolutely insane. Like you just mentioned, it's crazy to have that few vehicles running at the end of the race, and that's definitely not something that we should always aim to do. A lot of people do like to see the wrecking. There's some viewers out there that just like seeing crashes, and I don't personally understand that. You're not watching racing. Just go turn on Demolition Derby and you're good to go. There's one guy in particular that I was really rooting out for, and it's one of those guys that you usually look at and you don't think they're going to do good, but you just do it anyways, and that was Spencer Boyd. And I was surprised to see that he was able to survive and keep it going throughout the entire thing. Me being from the St. Louis area, and he's from St. Louis, he grew up and started his racing career behind the wheel of a Margay kart, and I just thought it was pretty cool to see him survive and outlast the thing. But as far as, the racing went, with all the crashing and stuff like that, it wasn't something I think was super, something to be proud of.
I will say, and John and I butted heads about this. In the group chat and even here, we were butting heads about it before we went live. And he said it was a fantastic race, one of the best of Speed Weeks, and I said I don't know, I wasn't a fan. There was some really good action. Like, there was a lot of good racing, but you can't look away from the fact that there was a ton of wrecks. And I think that's what takes away from it. When when you can't make more than 5 laps without having a wreck, it kind of takes away from the whole race because you just wipe out 3/4 of your field because you look like a bunch of 16-year-olds that just got your license, you know?
But then again, I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, everybody wants to win at Daytona. I mean, everyone wants to win, period, but everyone wants to win at Daytona. And when you know, especially looking at the truck series, I mean, I don't want to call them inexperienced, but in a, you know, comparison to your Cup and Xfinity drivers, you know, everyone, you know you've got the chance and you're going to push really hard to do it. So, I mean, and mistakes happen. I mean, that's with any racing, you know, platform that you're going to be in. And just, you know, that aspect of it, I mean, you can't really avoid that.
The 54 cut a tire, and then her vehicle, or Natalie's vehicle, ended up catching fire. It was a mess. She got thrown over the pit wall. I mean, just
come on.
And
She weighs like 2 pounds.
But then how can you not also mention in that situation, real briefly, that safety guy with the fire extinguisher trying to long shot that?
oh yeah, I mean,
Oh, I saw that. He was from like the next pit stall down, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He just, I will say the look that he got from that crew chief was priceless.
but that was the first little incident on track. Then we went 13 laps. That was our longest green flag run of the night, surprisingly. And then we had the big one. Well, the first big one, I should say.
I was gonna say which one. We only had like 7.
That was caused by Jordan Anderson. Just went for a hole that didn't exist, and he took quite a lick. I'm glad that he was okay after that. I'm glad for the safety of all the vehicles. Most trucks were tore up after that, so
That's crazy. You look at the still image of him impacting the wall, and it to me it just reminds me almost exactly of Dale Earnhardt's impact. I mean, the 3 car, Anderson was in the 3 truck. It was in turn 4. It was like a 45-degree angle. I mean, it was kind of an eerie image to look at.
Oh, absolutely, and it was not a soft hit by any means.
Yeah, even with safer barriers, that was a very hard hit.
Yeah, and the wind was knocked out of him for sure. Then we had a couple more laps. Then there was fluid on the track. I don't remember what happened with that caution. Forgive me. Then we had another 8 laps, and then Corey Roper, short track ace out of Texas. He was all over the racetrack. I'm just going to be nice about it. He was all over the racetrack. He ended up sideswiping, I believe, Crafton. Hit the inside wall, similar to Miguel Paludo. Didn't fly up in the air, but hit the wall pretty hard. That took a while. Then we went back green for another 6 laps. Then KBM took each other out. I think Todd Gilliland was bumping Harrison Burton, and it didn't work.
Didn't Todd Gilliland do something like that to somebody in the ARCA race?
He did it to Brandon McReynolds.
That's what I thought, yeah.
He didn't learn his lesson, so...
Yeah, see, that's the thing, man. You got these inexperienced, and it's, you know, they're 18. They're eligible for the truck series. You know, they're running for the championship, but it's kind of scary when you see... I just don't think NASCAR really polices people in terms of eligibility and, you know, are they really ready? Because Todd Gilliland made the same move in the ARCA race, and like you said, he didn't really learn his lesson. And, you know, to me, if I see somebody make a move like that, that's that inexperienced, and all they're out there to do is to learn, and they do something like that, you know, over aggression, that looks really bad, honestly. Like, that's kind of like, hey, you probably shouldn't be out here right now.
Yeah, exactly. I just... then Timothy Peters and Clay Greenfield got into an accident. I can't remember exactly what happened with that. It was...
Oh, that's when Greenfield drove through the tri-oval grass with his hood pulled up.
Oh yeah, that was
Yeah,
right
another-
afterwards. He couldn't see where he was going.
See,
Another meme highlight.
that was actually really cool. I wonder if that was like the Bird Box challenge. I wonder if like his spotter was like, you know, spotting him to his stall, because there's no way he could see.
Oh,
Like,
no.
if he would have found his stall on his own, that's amazing.
Then we had our first green-white checkered.
Oh yeah, Bobby Gerhart got turned.
Yeah, Bobby Gerhart getting pushed by Austin Wayne Self to the point where he ended up hitting the wall. I mean, he was slammed on the brakes, couldn't get stopped.
Yeah.
Uh,
See, to me and I know it's the end of the race, you're going for the win, but to me that's just really stupid. I mean, you've got what 9 trucks left. I mean, at that point there would have been like 11 or 12. What's the point of like, especially those smaller teams? You're basically guaranteed a top 10. A top 10 for that small of a team is huge.
Oh, I know, absolutely.
And we're not talking a small cup team. We're talking a small truck team. Like, these guys aren't out here really making money. You know what I mean? So to have a good day like that, that's huge.
Yeah,
And-
most of the time they're just lucky to have made it to Daytona.
Right. And a
Yeah.
lot of these guys, I mean, we still have starting park teams out there.
Mhm.
Sadly, in 2019, we're still talking about starting park teams, but you know, some of these teams are borderline starting park teams, and going out and junking their equipment.
So that led to the final restart with 9 cars left. Austin Hill took the victory. Everybody's new fan favorite, Ross Chastain, finished P3. As Bobby said, Spencer Boyd, which I was surprised about, got P4.
That was pretty impressive, honestly.
And Angela Rush, Derek Cope's daughter, or Amber Cope, infamous for her 2011 New Hampshire shenanigans, finished P8 in a Joe Nemechek truck, second highest finisher in Truck Series history for a female, only second to Jennifer Jo Cobb in 2011 at Daytona.
I believe she's Derek Cope's niece.
Oh, is it Derek Cope's niece? Well,
I believe so. Yeah. I mean, same difference. Apples to oranges, whatever.
related to Derek Cope.
Yes. And like you said, those sisters are known for what you talked about. Harvick versus Amber Cope at New Hampshire. Like, they've kind of proven that they're not necessarily the fastest on the track. They're not necessarily the most stable cars to pass or trucks in this situation, but yeah, good for her. She got a top 10. That's pretty cool to see.
Austin Hill won his first race. Hattori just won their third in a row. They won at their biggest stage at Daytona. Everybody was, I guess, upset that Austin Hill took that ride from Brett Moffitt, but Austin Hill was bringing sponsorship, and I guess everybody counted him out because Brett Moffitt was such a talent. I guess this kind of proves that maybe not so much. Maybe the truck was pretty good.
I think we'll really see when we go to Atlanta this weekend. I think we'll really see how much it was the truck and how well Brett Moffitt does at GMS, which is still a really good truck. But people were outraged by this, but what it came down to was funding. I mean, HRE barely made it through all of last year. I mean, there was a point in the year where they were about to close up shop. Brett Moffitt won them a race, and they kept going. And Austin Hill had funding for a full... I mean, think about this. You have the reigning Truck Series champion that just won the championship for your team. The only reason that they would get rid of you is if you don't have the funding, and Austin Hill had the full funding. I mean, if you know, that's the only reason they would get rid of him. So, and then, you know, Brett Moffitt found a ride, and it all worked out.
So, that was basically it for the truck race. That was our shenanigan-filled race of the weekend. Now we move over to the Xfinity Series, and yeah, it was a thing. It was a race.
That was not a race.
What was your opinion about it there, Mr. Buchanan?
Boy. Well, I think it's safe to say the bumper extension that they added to those cars that we've seen in the Cup Series the last couple of years, I don't think that helped. But I think it's also, I think Denny Hamlin said it, and he got a lot of hate for it. It didn't seem like they wanted to race. I don't think raceability was really a problem. But another thing that you also got to take into account, you know, maybe they've figured out something with this package that they haven't figured out yet. Because remember, with the Gen 6, when they first brought that around, remember Talladega fall 2013, where it was a Highline Fest around the outside, single file, you know, 30 cars deep or whatever it was.
It was like that for the first 3 races. The Daytona 500 was
right, yeah.
like that. Talladega 1 was...
That was they had a wreck late in the race, and that's what packed them up, and July Daytona was a little different, I think. But I mean, regardless, when to me, I think of it like the tandem. The tandem they could have done for a while, but they figured it out. I think that really they figured it out by accident, and then they realized it could work, and then later into the COT we saw that's what the racing was. It was all tandems because they went from one or two guys trying it and it would work, and then there was the pack plus the tandems, and then it was all tandems, and then NASCAR's like, all right, we don't like this, and then they changed the package.
Yeah.
Well, part of the reason they changed that package, and it does make sense, what caused Larson's wreck in 2013.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's fair. That's understandable. But I mean, look at that package, okay? It took them a while to figure that out. I think if they figure out, hey, top lane with this car, that's if we got so many cars around the top, maybe that's the fastest way to go. Keep your momentum up, and I think it's definitely harder to make moves if you're going from top to bottom with no help than it is bottom to top. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but I think with this car, I think that's what you're looking at. Because I mean, we saw guys pull out a line, and guys were content to sit on that outside line, but the raceability didn't seem very good with that package. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the guys just were content to sit, and that's what it was. But not exciting at all.
Well, another point that was made, which Brian Keselowski, of course, he's the crew chief for one of Carl Long's cars for MBM Motorsports. He pointed the blame at the new body because last year, when we came to Daytona, it was the steel body still. It wasn't mandatory for the composite body to go on super speedways. Well, this year it's now mandatory for composite bodies, and he mentioned that the composite body was not as easy to manipulate, which
makes sense.
Which could have led to that, but I think it was just a combination of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the only highlight of the two highlights of the race were Ray Black Jr. getting spun off or down the backstretch, and then Brad Keselowski revitalizing the convertible series at Daytona. I didn't know I wanted it until Saturday, but I do want it now.
Yeah, I mean, I think one takeaway, and it was a really cool takeaway from that Xfinity race, was getting to see Jeffrey Earnhardt in a black car lead laps at Daytona. I mean, Earnhardt in a black car at Daytona leading laps. I mean, if you're looking at, especially the old timer NASCAR fans, I think they'd appreciate that a lot. Just, even if it was a good car, and even if he was put in that scenario just from where he started, I mean, it was cool. It was definitely cool to see. I think it was great for the sport, to have an Earnhardt back out front at Daytona.
Oh,
it's just one of those little emotional things, just kind of very similar as we're going to get to at the Cup Series race, to have those little moments that, mean something, very similar to like the JD Gibbs situation with their performance in the Cup Series race.
Stage 2, Ross Chastain ended up making a move, putting himself out front, and won another stage, which just, why does this guy not have a full-time ride? Why doesn't he have a sponsor backing him up? Like, it just screams, come on, there's a return on investment there.
Yeah. He almost finished top 10 in every race at Daytona.
Yeah, finished third, 13th.
Yeah, 13th in the Xfinity race, right?
And 10th in the Cup race.
Right. Yeah. So this dude in mostly underfunded equipment almost finished top 10 in every single Daytona race that paid
Speaks
points.
Volumes.
Finished every lap too.
Finished every lap,
which is pretty impressive considering the shenanigans of the truck race and the shenanigans of the Cup race with 10 to go.
Some people will say it's luck, but I mean, the results show, especially you look at what he did last year with Ganassi. I mean, That's a limited. I mean, he had 3 races with them. It's like, show us what you got. I mean, that's very limited opportunities there, and
He almost
he did something with it. He won a race and showed that he belonged to be there.
Hold
He
my
al-
watermelon.
he almost won Darlington, the toughest track on the circuit, in race 1. But
Thank Kevin Harvick.
yeah, thank Kevin Hart for that. So that was basic. Well, we've kind of forgot about the winner. Michael Annett snapped a 229 race winless streak to get his first win in the Xfinity Series.
Yeah,
With Travis Mack as a crew chief as well. I've always been a critic of Michael, but I'm really a fan now. I think
Right.
that he's going to turn it around, honestly, this year.
well, like him or not, I mean, this was a big moment for him. Being able to win his first Xfinity race, and I think all the critics. I think that kind of, even though it's a plate race, I think it kind of quieted them a little bit. Just seeing that, hey, he can win a race, and that's big because you're in top-notch equipment, and I think he kind of even realized like, hey, this is pretty cool. It's a long time coming, long overdue, but he got the job done. That's all that matters.
Exactly. But that was basically it for the Xfinity race. And our final race of the weekend, which I'm going to say right now was my most pleasantly surprised race of the weekend,
It was the best race of the weekend,
was
really.
the Daytona
Hands
500.
down.
Definitely.
Going into the weekend, like you said earlier in the podcast, I didn't expect much.
Not a lot to look forward to, no.
No, it was basically have fun watching, the Mile High Line.
Or a wreck fest.
Yeah, it was going to be no in between, but from the drop of the green flag, they were racing side by side. I mean, there were parts where they were single file,
Right.
but it was fantastic.
It looked
Well-
like how Daytona should be.
Oh, I completely agree. It reminded me a lot, in terms of side by side racing of the 2016 race.
Yep. Well, I mean, at least it wasn't 2018 where we wadded up a quarter of the field at the end of stage 1. Love it or hate it, there was a lot of wrecks at the end. A lot of cars didn't finish the race, but it was all at the end of the race. It was when it was go time. It was when you were supposed to race. When it was all on the line. Last year it was. Man, they were wrecking for stage points. There were points where they weren't even wrecking for stage points. They were just wrecking. So, I mean, they cleaned it up this year and they put on a really good show.
Especially, that late into the race, you gotta make the move if you want to put yourself in contention to finish high in the Daytona 500. So,
And like you said, Bobby, very cool to see Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin gets a lot of critics, I think, mainly because of what's happened on track with Chase Elliott. Over the past couple years. I mean, that's obviously you rough up one of the most popular drivers in the sport. Probably not going to get a lot of love for that one, but regardless, it's cool to see, somebody really I think is one of the best drivers to not win a Cup championship. I think we can say that now.
he's very skilled, yes.
Right, yeah. Two Daytona 500s. He's won the Southern 500. Has not quite won the Brickyard yet. Has he won a Coke 600?
I don't believe so. Don't
No.
quote me.
He's won a lot of races, though. And he's been in the championship 4 before, and maybe this year's his year, but it was really big for that team, kind of not necessarily putting the passing of J.D. Gibbs behind them, but basically saying, hey, we can cope with the pressure. We can still race with it. Because J.D. Gibbs, I mean, Joe Gibbs' name is on the banner, but J.D. Gibbs was a big part of that team. And to see that they can go out there and still run really well, even without him there, it kind of says a lot about that organization.
Yeah, not even executively, but a lot of the drivers, and you could hear it through their interviews during the pre-race and post-race, how much that JD meant to them personally. And you could even, there was a clip that stood out to me from the media center when they sat down with Kyle, Joey, and Eric Jones, and they just kind of threw it, threw it at them about JD, and even Joey, said, I mean, coming from Gibbs and then into his time at Penske, saying, I can step away from my alliance and my connection with Penske to just really point out how awesome it is for you guys to have finished 1, 2, 3 in the race. And from some guy like Logano that's, sitting across the table from Kyle Busch, who they've obviously had issues from before, and to have that level of respect, that speaks a lot of volumes for, how important JD Gibbs was for not just the current, Joe Gibbs drivers, but for the entire organization of NASCAR.
Yeah, it does say a lot because it's especially for Logano, because his departure from Joe Gibbs wasn't necessarily a pretty one. There was a lot of rumors of, kind of the stuff that was going on there. It kind of just really seemed like Logano wasn't at home at Gibbs, almost as how Daniel Suarez was when he was at Gibbs, and now has since left to go to Stewart-Haas. But it's still, like you said, cool to see people paying tribute. And you think about it, JD Gibbs has really found a lot of talent, has brought up a lot of talent in NASCAR. It's, not something that's really been documented a whole lot, but he's really been a big part of a lot of people's careers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was sad to hear about JD's passing. I always, whenever it was first announced that he would be stepping away from the team, I always, kind of questioned what was going on behind the scenes. It was kind of very secretive, very hush-hush. So, it's unfortunate that JD passed, but I hope it does bring some light into what football injuries can do to you.
Right. And I was very impressed with Coach Gibbs's composure during the race, during that commemorative lap where they paid tribute to JD Gibbs. I mean, even after the race, very composed. I mean, very professional. It kind of says a lot about, his character. Obviously, being very respectful of his son, but it still shows that, they were there for business. They were there to win that race, and they executed perfectly.
Then in between pit stops, right as they were about to pit, they were about to lap the field. The first pack which was kind of crazy to see. The Casey Mears and the 27 and Parker Kligerman had some type of scuffle. It was off camera. It was not really shown during the race what happened. Casey said that it was Parker's fault. Parker said it was Casey's fault. Who knows? I think in 2019 we'd be able to see what happens at all times.
Yeah, thanks, Fox.
Now, I'm just going to blame that on all sports.
Well, it goes back to Fox and their production crew, which they've seen a lot of scrutiny the last couple years, and it's been very public that people have voiced their opinion about how they feel about Fox, and the fact that they, out of all their cameras, and I don't know how many cameras they had there. I mean, if I really wanted to, I guess I could find out how many cameras that they had for the production of that race, but the fact they don't have one camera on turn one when that wreck happens, yeah, it's at the back of the field with 2 cars or whatever, but man, I will say, if that wreck would have happened, continued on a couple seconds later, there's a whole pack of cars coming at them.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is in the middle of, you got guys that pitted, to play the strategy game, to cycle forward when you get the stage yellow. Then you got the guys that are just playing it out and waiting. They're all in this pack right behind Casey Mears and Parker Kligerman. I mean, that could have been a really bad incident if they would have did that in front of the whole field.
Oh, absolutely. This has been something that I've been kind of pushing for. I wish NASCAR would do. I know the cost is astronomical, but I truly and honestly believe that every car should at least have a roof camera. If not an onboard, every car should have a onboard camera of some sort. So, similar to F1, so that if something happens, we're not all scrambling like, oh, well, it kind of looks like this. We can go to the onboard camera and see, oh, that's what happened.
Right.
Not necessarily for broadcast purposes too, but they're always wanting to advance safety in the sport, and you can learn a lot from the onboard technology, not necessarily just the cameras, but all sorts of telemetry.
Yeah, and they went to the system where everybody can see everybody's telemetry, so it's not like it's a leap and bound, per se, with technology.
But that's a good point, though. Say that was was a wreck that, I hate to say it was a wreck where somebody got hurt. All right, you have no video footage of it, so you have no. I mean, you've got the telemetry, but the visual aid, the visual aspect of it, it plays a really big factor into an investigation of a wreck, whether it's a NASCAR wreck where they're looking to make safety gains, or whether it's a criminal investigation. You know what I mean? Like, this even goes to civil cases. You know what I mean? Like, visual aids are very helpful.
Yeah.
And you can learn a lot from looking at the wrecked car, but it only tells you up to a certain point with some amount of certainty. When you actually visually can see it, then that's when it gets pushed over and, oh, you know exactly this is what happened.
Let's NBC it.
Yeah. Well, with the onboard camera, that increased the fan accessibility, and it would give something that's truly only used in, say, Formula One, in a major motorsport in America, where you're getting an angle from every car. So it's not like you're going to miss any action. So it kind of plays off that. But then we start stage 3, had a 30-lap run. We were coming in for pit stops. It was going to be the final pit stops here, first round. Cody Ware, there were some miscommunications. It seemed like Ricky Stenhouse basically ghost pitted, did not tell anybody he was pitting, except for giving some cryptic signals. Well, everybody pitted off turn 4. Cody Ware didn't see it. He ran into the back of his teammate, a BJ McLeod. They spun into Tyler Reddick, which ramped off of Jimmy Johnson, which, thank God that happened where it did, not closer to the pit wall, where he could have gone over the pit wall, and had a little accident on pit road, which brought out the caution.
Very scary, because those guys are laying out for their stops. You know, those crew guys are you know, they're not over the wall yet, but you got guys up on the wall. So even if it's not a car impacting that pit wall, a piece of debris, a tire comes loose, it's a flying object then that they all have to dodge. So
Yeah.
it's very fortunate that like you said, where it happened where it did.
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of scary. So glad it happened where it did. So again, then from here on out, we don't have a run more than 10 laps. I didn't actually realize this. So we get another 7-lap run. There was debris in turn 3. I can't remember exactly what happened.
You were livid by this, by the way. I remember this because you got very upset about this that they threw a debris caution.
Yeah, but after I saw it, it was an actual large piece of debris. So
Yeah. I mean,
like,
they needed to throw the yellow in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. So 4 laps went by. Then Kyle Larson, who was kind of having a mediocre day, blew a tire going into 3. Didn't hit anything, surprisingly.
Man, did he save that vehicle? I mean, he didn't. I mean, you can only save a vehicle so much, but for going at the speeds that you're going into turn 3 like that and to do what he did, I mean, I'm always impressed when, and it sounds weird to say it like this, but I mean, I think we all can agree, when he does crash, he crashes very gracefully.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
I mean, the way that thing started crabbing back and forth when the tire blew, it looked like he was going to point for the wall. It looked like he was going to overcorrect, you know, into the whole field. It starts to point to the infield, and he gasses. I mean, the throttle control, you know, I can't even explain it, man. I don't think he could even explain it. Like, the car control this dude has is incredible. He kept it down on the apron for the most part. I think he tore it up a little bit for the transition to the apron, you know, because the body work hangs so low. But regardless, incredible job to basically save that race car.
So 42 car has his ordeal. We go back green, another three lap run, and then Keselowski blows a left rear tire. He was not a factor all day. Everybody
surprisingly.
Very surprisingly.
I picked him.
Yeah, he'd be up there.
I picked him, and he still, I mean, wasn't a factor. And I think the odds had him winning it. Like, he had the best odds to win, and he was not a factor all day.
Yeah, blew a tire, ended up getting stalled, lost a lap in the process. And it was just it didn't look good for him, but it's okay. It all worked out. Well, then we got restarted again. We only went one lap, and then the big one happened. Paul Menard turned Matt DiBenedetto in front of the entire field. In turn 3, which, off topic here, but is it me or has almost every single big one at Daytona in recent memory happened going into turn 3 or in turn 3?
I was thinking the
During
exact same
during
thing.
the Gen 6 era, that is.
2017 July, there was one entering turn 1, but it was basically the same deal. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you think the July race last year?
The July race when
stage 1 end of last year when Stenhouse made a stupid block and they wadded up like half the field coming to the end of the stage. Yeah, that was entering turn 3. I mean, you're right. That's been the trouble spot.
Yeah, the Gen 6 big one back in 2013 when Almirola, or 2015 when Almirola won the July race.
2014.
2014, my apologies. Yes. Yeah. That one also happened going into.
That was a bizarre wreck, though.
That was a very bizarre wreck, but it still happened at this almost
right. Yeah.
Same exact type of thing too.
I mean, the logic of it makes sense to me, at least in the fact that that's you don't want to make a move going, into 1 and 2 with the possibility of you still having half a racetrack to do that. I mean, it makes more sense to me that people get more antsy and nuts when it's the last 2 turns of the racetrack. So it would make sense that that'd be a more problem spot.
Well, my theory is that it's the farthest. It's a far away from the spotters, so kind of clearing somebody is kind of difficult there. So that would be my only guess as to why it happens in turn 3. It seems like
and maintaining your momentum is so big with plate racing, and with how it wasn't necessarily gridlocked, but how the 2 lanes were, maintaining your momentum was so important. So if you got a run on the guy in front of you, you definitely wanted to push him if you could. And Paul Menard bumped him going into turn 3, kind of bumped him in the wrong spot. And as you're transitioning from the straightaway to the turn, so you got the change in banking, and it just unsettled the car and turned him. And it sucked for DiBenedetto, man, because he was having a great race. Good to see him pick up a decent ride. I hope he gets to do something with that this year.
And a lot of new fans.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So then we clean up that. We have a red, of course, with that. We finally get that cleaned up. We're getting back ready to go to green with 5 laps to go. And of course, everybody's super speedway sweetheart, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. went for a gap that was never there and wrecked Larson and wrecked up another 4 or 5 cars in the process. Wrecked Larson, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, Kevin Harvick, Ty Dillon, and Brad Keselowski.
I think it's worth pointing out that what happened in that wreck somewhat happened to Paul Menard and Jimmy Johnson in the clash. Because remember, when Jimmy side drafted Paul, it kind of pulled the 21 car to Johnson's right front corner a little bit. And you could see Kyle Larson, his car moved kind of the same way almost when Stenhouse went for that move. So very bizarre how side drafting somebody actually pulls them into you.
But I will say, though, from at least replay, there wasn't that much gap either way.
Yeah.
Even with the movement. But I will say, in that wreck, Ryan Preece got lucky drivers.
Big time.
He got very lucky, splitting the gap there.
The onboard, he's even grabbing gears going from the banking to the apron, back up to the banking. Like, it was insane. Like, usually you see guys grabbing gears like that, they spin. And he maintained control of it. It was pretty impressive.
Exactly. And then we have another restart with 2 laps to go in regulation. Everybody thinks it's finally over. No, it wasn't. Clint Bowyer misjudged his line there with Michael McDowell, turned himself in front of the field. It was not the most pleasant of wrecks. He even admitted fault to it. That prompted another red flag. At this point, there were about 14 cars on the lead lap, about 3 of which were left without damage. and about 18 cars running in total. So after that happened, we had our green-white checkered restart. Denny Hamlin pretty easily walked away with it and won the race for Joe Gibbs Racing.
Now, I will say it's worth pointing out there was a lot of swapping between second and third and fourth those last 2 laps. And I understand, if you think you got the best car out of that group, you definitely want to put yourself in front of them to put yourself in a position to, pass the leader. But I think you give yourself a better chance at winning the race if you push the guy in front of you, push second place, let him and the leader get side by side, and then you could potentially make it 3 wide. I mean, people didn't like him when he did this, but Kyle Busch in the Clash 2 years ago kind of got a little upset with Alex Bowman for not pushing him, which, I mean, Bowman was entitled to race him like anybody else is. But at the end of the day, if Bowman would have pushed Kyle, they would have had a shot at beating Joey Logano in that race. So I think the same could have been said in this race, but hindsight 2020, you never know.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes sense on paper, but I never really would expect Kyle and Joey to do that.
No.
No, not. It was. I think Joey was mad at a fellow Ford driver, Michael McDowell, for not pushing him, and he even told him, "I'm not getting paid to push you. I'm getting paid to go win the race." Which, you know what? Good for him, because, quite honestly, I'm kind of sick of this manufactured crap where they all work together. It's just, it ruins it. They had to adapt out of necessity, but it ruins it. But I'm looking here at the lap leaders. Matt DiBenedetto. Who would have guessed going into the race that he would lead the most laps, and William Byron would lead the second most laps?
Byron's not a surprise just because he's in a Hendrick car, and those cars were really fast. But yeah, DiBenedetto really turned some heads. Being at the back most of the time, it really speaks volumes that it's not necessarily as much on the driver if you're at the back of the field. It's more on the car. Because when you run those smaller teams, you could probably put Kyle Busch in an underfunded car. He's not going to run in the top 20.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That's the truth. So I think that's Speed Week's wrapped up.
That does it for Speed Weeks, yeah.
That does it for Speed Weeks. Next week we get to experience the tapered spacer package and the high downforce drag package at Atlanta. I'm going to be apprehensive to see how it is.
Right. I mean, we got to have an optimistic attitude about it, obviously. I mean, I think most fans try to have that. But, man, I mean, if it doesn't live up to the hype, and I think it's fair to say it's either going to be amazing or it's going to be boring. But I think it's safe to say if it's not as exciting as people think it's going to be, then it's just going to be, 367 laps or 267 laps of them riding around at 180 miles an hour, basically.
And I think this Speed Weeks is just kind of a good testament to the fans. Is like we tooted the horn all episode thus far, as mentioning how much of a bore we expected for the Daytona 500, and we were completely, it was the opposite. So I don't think we can really make that fair assessment until a checkered flag's thrown. So
right,
yeah, I agree with that. So there are a couple more topics to talk about here for this week. Let's talk about this. We wrapped up the first 2 days of Formula One testing at Barcelona. The first test for Formula One. Currently, Ferrari has been leading the way with Vettel and Charles Leclerc, both leading in terms of amount of laps ran and fastest times. So the Ferraris are looking great. McLaren looks great as well with their lap time, but they also got a lot of laps in, which is something that's been has plagued McLaren throughout its last few years. First year with Renault and all the days with Honda. One surprise, though, is that Williams has yet to debut their car on track. A lot of people are up in arms and starting to question the direction of Claire Williams and the Williams team. Supposedly the car arrived late last night, or late this morning, I should say, their time, and should be on track by the afternoon, if they're lucky. A lot of people are actually calling for Patty Lowe, who used to be the technical director of Mercedes, fired from Williams due to his competence with running the team as of late. But yeah, there was a lot of highlights from this first day of testing. I'm not sure if anybody got to see it or not. Mostly just some spin-offs and such like that. The only crazy thing really was Ricardo was going down the main straight and his DRS flap flew off. He lost the flap for the DRS and it flew off. He ended up spinning off at turn 1 there at Barcelona. Did little damage to the car, got it in the gravel. You know, he was able to continue and actually drive it back once he got unstuck.
That's scary.
Yeah, that is scary. Not sure if y'all saw the replay, but it was very interesting to see it fly off. But I will say though, the car looks better without that flap.
Yeah. out of all drivers though, I think this year, if you're looking for somebody to see how they do, I think seeing how Daniel Ricciardo does with his new team, Renault, I think it's very interesting because he left Red Bull, which was established as one of the powerhouse teams, not up there with Mercedes, not up there with Ferrari quite, but on the downforce tracks they were pretty solid, and taking what you were basically guaranteed with them, going to a completely unknown with Renault and trying to see what you can build with them. It's a big risk, but I mean, remember all the way back, was 04, 05 with Fernando Alonso?
Yes.
What he was able to accomplish, or was it 05, 06?
05, 06.
05, 06, yes. What he was able to do with Renault. So I mean, that team has seen success. So it wouldn't be the first time. So it'd be I got my eyes on them this year, I think.
I definitely agree. The Renault move was definitely a big question mark. A lot of people pointed him to going towards Ferrari with Vettel, but it just didn't end up working out. I think he was just sick of the engine failures and the random mechanical failures with these new hybrid cars. And it was really sad to see because he was running great almost every single week until the MGUK failed, the engine failed, the gearbox failed. It became sad to a point, and I could see why he wanted the change. The most interesting battle that I'm looking forward to looking at this season will be Leclerc and Vettel. Sebastian was at Red Bull, was definitely put into the number one driver role there. Then Danny Rick got promoted up to Red Bull. Their first year, he won 3 races. Vettel, none. 1. Here, and after that, he left the team and went straight to Ferrari. So, I don't see Vettel as a very strong, contender mentally in terms of the car. I'm not saying that he's not talented. By all means, he's very talented, but I just don't see. I don't see him having as much success as he had with Kimi Räikkönen as his teammate.
Who was it that took shots at him over the off? Was it somebody took shots at him over the off season? I believe.
I can't remember who it was, but I believe it was one of the F1 pundits. Just, in my personal opinion, you don't come that close to a championship and lose it. It's not all team. At that point, it goes to driver. I mean, he had Germany won until it started drizzling rain, and he should have came in, but he didn't.
And I mean, you can't question somebody's livelihood. I mean, when you look at what they've accomplished over their career, I mean, 4 world championships.
In a car that was a complete monopoly, similar to the Mercedes though now. And look at his teammates then. He had Mark Webber. I'm not taking anything away from Mark. Don't get me wrong. Mark was a very talented driver, but he wasn't, say, a Vettel.
Right.
Such like that. You have somebody like a Nico Rosberg in that situation who, he went up against one of the best with Lewis Hamilton and, went toe-to-toe with him and won out in 2016 and then retired because he just couldn't deal with the mental drain that Hamilton has. Hamilton, it just takes another level to deal with him.
Well, I think it's also fair to say, I mean, I think we all know, I mean, Rosberg wasn't the number one driver there. I mean, it was Hamilton. And to deal with the, F1 is all about team orders. You don't really see that in other forms of motorsports. Well, I mean...
Well, team orders is banned, but
implied
team orders, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you still have it. There's preference of one driver over the next. But I think that's really cool that we saw Rosberg and Hamilton go toe-to-toe for it. Seeing 2 teammates. I mean, they even took each other out in some races.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. They took each other out in races. They butted heads. It was hurting the team overall, but they had such a monopoly on it. It was okay. But if they would have had something similar to that last year, Ferrari would have won handily.
So I think it's worth pointing out as we move on to some IndyCar news. On Tuesday, it was announced that IndyCars would have some new cockpit safety advancements, some new features on their cars, which are to be, the 500 and beyond. Those cars would have those features on them, which is a good step in the direction, obviously trying to limit the debris field from getting to the driver.
Yeah. So let's give some background on this. So we had wrecks of Jules Bianchi, Justin Wilson, there was one other, Felipe Massa.
James Hinchcliffe get hit in the head at the Indy GP in 2014.
Yeah, James Hinchcliffe, where drivers would be getting hit in the head with debris. Not something that was, I guess there was always an inherent risk there, but it was not as prevalent as what it has been in recent years. So IndyCar searched for a solution to this said problem. F1 went the route of the Halo, which, we could sit here all day and discuss, safety versus, aesthetic appeal and, the risk of racing, and it kind of dilutes that and the risk. And anyway, let's not debate that. So IndyCar, I know that initially they wanted to test an aero screen. I know Scott Dixon tested it along with Joseph Newgarden. I'm not sure what happened to that design.
I think it's still on the drawing board because I think they said it would be as early as 2020 that we would see it.
Yeah, I'm thinking that Newgarden had some criticism to it, but was not completely opposed to it. But overall, it looked okay. It was integrated well within the car. Drivers said that, there was some warping, but they said that there was nowhere near as much as what they would have thought there would have been.
It's very impressive because PPG was the group that manufactured the aero screen, and like John said, with a screen like that where it bends and you've got the certain degree of angles where it wraps around the cockpit. Mm-hmm. When you've got, whether it's under the lights and you've got the track lights or it's, the natural sun, you've got light coming into the cockpit. Well, now it's coming through a screen, essentially a window, and, the light is bending around the screen. I think they did a fantastic job with it, honestly, considering how much that bends, and there's not not really that much warping.
No, but the one thing that I remember when Joseph made remarks on that windscreen was just talking about the compatibility between his helmet visor and the windscreen, and that there was some sort of distortion through the two, which is, kinks that could be worked out. But one of the things that he, took out of it was, that it's something that he could easily get used to if it was mandatory, no problem. And I think that's the big thing is, I mean, like we just mentioned, the aesthetic versus safety. And, if it's going to save, injuries and save lives, then, that's obviously the number one priority for the drivers.
Yeah, so getting back to this little device, it actually has a name. It's called the Advanced Frontal Protection. It's a little piece of titanium. It's about 3 inches long and about 3/4 of an inch thick. And it's designed, as you said, to deflect some debris around. So it looks like they've been testing this, at least in the simulator and on track, on and off since the DW12 came out for a version of this. Like you said, they are going to implement it from Indianapolis on. It looks like IndyCar also gave an update on Aeroscreen. So they were working with PPG Aerospace on it. They ran tests at ISM and Indianapolis. They said they didn't report problems, but according to PPG and IndyCar, they feel like they need to work a lot more on it before they can actually implement it.
Right. Which that makes sense. That's a big change to make. So that's not something you just want to throw in there and say, all right, let's test this in a race.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, I believe this to be a stopgap until they actually figure out what's best, or if they can, or how they can get the windscreen to work, because I think that's the route they're going to go.
Right. And ultimately, think about how Justin Wilson was hit when he was involved in his fatal crash at Pocono. The piece of debris that hit him really hit him in the top of the head. It looks like it just shot straight out of the sky and hit him. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a frontal or a side impact. It looked like it came from straight up and down.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously at a little bit of an angle, but really that's the only concern I would think. If you have a windscreen or something like the AFP is coming from the top, if you have debris coming from the top of the car and impacting the driver's helmet.
Yeah, no, you have this AFP on the IndyCar. I mean, it definitely wouldn't have saved his life on that.
Yeah, and there's not going to be a solve all stopgap to this. You could go the route of, say, a Red Bull X 2010, the concept car, where it's completely encased cockpit and such like that, but you kind of lose the aspect and the whole draw of IndyCar racing with it being an open cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you want the open cockpit and risk inherent rules? Do you go compromise? Do you not have anything at all? Which more and more pundits are saying that just can't happen. So,
and I don't think the drivers are really critics of safety, and I don't think they're really critics of being put into these situations. They know what they sign up for. Obviously, you don't want to take unnecessary risks, but at the end of the day, it's what they sign up for, and they realize it's open cockpits. When you start in a kart and then you start racing, say Formula Fords, and you start working your way up, you make your way to the road to Indy, or you race in Europe, you're racing in formula cars this whole time. They're all open cockpit, so it's not like it's your first time racing something like that. It's a risk that you've dealt with your whole career.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're aware of it. They're obviously okay with it if they continue to do it. So it's up to them.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they didn't want that risk of open cockpit, open wheel, then they would go into something more along the lines of like a NASCAR or,
Sports cars or something.
yeah.
Right.
Sports cars, midgets, that type of stuff. This was a jam-packed podcast for us, guys. Is there any final thoughts about the week or this upcoming week about what we could expect?
We're on to Atlanta.
We are on to Atlanta. Do we have any IMSA racing next week?
No, the next race is Sebring.
Which is, 2 weeks?
I believe so.
Okay, so there's that coming up. IndyCar's coming up in a month. I know
Less
that.
than a month.
Less than a month, see?
No, it's not. Yes, it is. I don't
Okay.
know.
It's about 3. It looks like
I've lost track of my days. That's what happens when you become an adult, people. If you're an adult, you understand where I'm coming from. If you're not an adult, just wait.
they're about 3 weeks out from Sebring. 12 hours, and then the 1,000 kilometer they're running the next
For
the
WC.
day- yeah, WEC, which I don't know what they were thinking with that.
Hey, to each their own.
Yeah, and of course we have St. Pete coming up. F1 starting in Melbourne in about 30 days, about 2 weeks, or not 2 weeks, about 4 weeks. So yeah, we're about ready. We're starting the schedule and such like that. But here in a couple weeks we're gonna have 4 and 5 series going at the same time.
Oh yeah, it's all exciting. I want to thank John and Bobby for joining me, fellas. It's great having you. It's great to have some co-hosts as we move forward with the show.
Yes, thank you, Zach, for bringing us on here. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, I've had a really good time.
Yeah, it's a blast. Thank you.
And I think we should plug our personal accounts. John, Twitter, Instagram, anything you want to promote before we sign off.
All right, so let me think off the top of my head. So I do have a gaming channel. It's JP3 Gaming on YouTube, JP3 Gaming 56 on Twitch. I stream a bit of iRacing, a bit of Nintendo games, a bit of this, a bit of that, basically anything that I like, to put it best. You can find me streaming at random points during the week. As for Twitter, my personal handle is JSPool, with an E on the end, III. And you can find me tweeting about NASCAR or retweeting about NASCAR and not really posting any opinions about anything.
Bobby Krug, where can we find you?
So you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. All of them are under ATA Network. Like I mentioned at the top of the hour, a kart racer, so a lot of my content is focused around that. So I'll be starting up the 2019 Ignite series and doing some video production for Margay Racing. So we're going to be going to COTA this upcoming weekend, so there'll be some videos from that. So a lot of karting content on that channel, and same thing with my Instagram and my Twitter. So
Awesome. If you want to find me on Twitter or Instagram, it's at ZBCannon4. Check my my karting channel out on YouTube. It's under my name, Zach Buchanan, or check out my karting page on Facebook, Zach Buchanan Racing. Fellas, we had a lot to talk about this week, but we move on to Atlanta for the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you want to follow the podcast on Twitter, it's at The Pit Limiter. Make sure you follow us on Facebook as well, The Pit Limiter Podcast. And if you miss an episode, head over to our YouTube channel, The Pit Limiter Podcast, as well. Or listen to us live every Tuesday night, or tonight, Wednesday night, 7 p.m. With that, thanks for everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on the Pit Limiter Podcast.